Good morning from the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, and this is your Access and Privacy Online news summary for Saturday, March 29th, and the first week of the federal election in Canada. In this week's cast, we see Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston moving to turn the page on Bill 1 legislative changes. We also have our first weekly scan of stories from Canadian press that intersect access to information, privacy, and information management across Canada, the US, and around the world. And as Fraud Prevention Month draws to a close, we'll look at cautionary tales in cybersecurity, including that signal-related controversy in the US. It's another jam-packed week with a lot to go over, so let's dive in. Starting in Nova Scotia, we have continued coverage of the legislative developments there. The province is considering further amendments to legislation affecting both interprovincial trade and information laws. Premier Tim Houston has backed away from some proposed changes that sparked controversy during the sitting, despite his party holding 43 of the 55 seats in the legislature. The government is amending proposed legislation on the province's Freedom of Information rules, following criticism the bill would threaten the public's right to access government records and documents. Political observers note the legislature's actions could be consolidating power around the premier's office. Opponents and analysts warn that the bills are advancing rapidly, and that despite attempts at openness, such centralization might dilute meaningful oversight. They argue that the public's right to know shouldn't be overshadowed by political maneuvering. However, Houston said he doesn't accept the idea his government is moving too fast to push through legislation. Houston seems determined to address some of the concerns around transparency, hoping these changes will rebuild trust among stakeholders. In a separate move, Nova Scotia's legislature voted to discontinue rebates for certain electric vehicles, including Tesla models. Earlier this week, Manitoba's NDP government dropped Tesla and Chinese-made electric vehicles from its EV rebate program, while BC Hydro has also said it is banning new Tesla products from its own rebate initiative. Proponents argue it ensures fair allocation of resources across various EV manufacturers. Critics see it as a setback for green initiatives. Either way, it signals the government's readiness to reshape policy amidst broader international developments. Protesters have been picketing outside a Tesla dealership in Ottawa recently, while there have been similar protests at dealerships in Quebec and British Columbia. As Nova Scotia's legislature grapples with transparency and policy balance, let's head westward for a snapshot of stories around Canada that underscore the importance of information rights and privacy safeguards. From Lauren Phillips, LGI reporter at the Coast. Education workers celebrate improved wages and enhanced school safety measures, an agreement that reflects growing demands for transparency on how funds are allocated and used for public sector salaries and protective measures. In Nova Scotia, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, or the CUPE, represents education workers, bus drivers, librarian assistants, early childhood educators, teaching assistants, and more, across 7 regional centers for education and the Acadian Provincial School Board. Thanks to this group, over 5,000 education workers in Nova Scotia have signed a new 2-year deal with the province after nearly a year of bargaining. Among the requests are increased access to violent incident reports and their follow-up processes, with personal information redacted for privacy for CUPE's members to track responses and trends. From Andrew Bates, LGI reporter at the Telegraph Journal. In New Brunswick, the famed chocolatier Ganong Bros reports a possible data breach. This underscores the growing cybersecurity threats businesses face and serves as a reminder that customer and employee data protection remains critical. Ganong Bros experienced an IT security incident on February 22nd that impacted some systems. Director of Public Relations Claire Ryan told Brunswick News. The company has retained third-party cybersecurity experts and legal counsel to, quote, assist with containment, remediation, and to conduct a forensic investigation to determine the extent of the incident, end quote. In Quebec, documents obtained through access to information reveal internal reviews highlighting administrative shortfalls and bringing much-needed foreign nurses to the province. A $65 million initiative announced in 2022 aimed to bring 1,500 foreign nurses to Quebec by 2028 to work in regions of the province with acute nursing shortages. Candidates were to receive training at junior colleges funded by the government and be paid $500 a week. However, the 2024 report on the first phase of the program paints an image of a poorly organized project that failed to prepare foreign nurses for what to expect when they came to Canada. Shifting to Ontario, from Ed Smith, LGI reporter at The Pointer. Documents obtained through Freedom of Information requests show potential underreporting of environmental risks near a former industrial site. New documents reveal that important comments from Niagara Regional Public Health were intended to inform the council and the public about potential health risks associated with the site. However, comments were removed from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks PowerPoint presentation and the written document of record before the public presentation in December 2020. Health experts stressed the need for transparency to fully assess impacts on community well-being. Moving west, from Maggie McIntosh, LGI reporter at the Winnipeg Free Press. Officials have unveiled a plan to address infrastructure gaps by constructing multiple schools. The Kinnu government plans to break ground on 11 new public schools before the end of its first term by using a template that designers will copy and paste with a universal blueprint for new builds to replace existing design requirements. Freedom of Information requests are being employed to track current bidders. Observers note the importance of publicly accessible data on development timelines and costs to maintain accountability. From Tyler Stockton, LGI reporter at Yukon News. A conflict has emerged between a social services provider and a local community group regarding contract terms. The recycling center in downtown Whitehorse alleges that the Yukon government took them off a transportation contract for shipping recyclables from the communities out of the territory. The director of the recycling center said they only learned about the contract changes and the communications to the community depots through access to information requests. However, the Minister of Community Services claims that the recycling center knew that they'd no longer be receiving shipments of recycling from the communities. Advocates say clarity in public contracts is vital so that community members understand how funds are being used and services managed. From Somya Loya, LGI reporter at Shootin' the Breeze. Alberta's Crow's Nest Pass debates whether to move forward with a contentious development project, while some community members remain frustrated with the lack of public engagement and access to information. If approved, the rezoning would allow for the development of apartment buildings up to 3 stories high. Residents have said very little information has been shared on such a drastic potential change to their neighborhood. Information access is central to the community's concerns, as residents demand open data on environmental and economic impacts. There is also continued coverage of a new bill in Alberta proposing to restrict federal access to oil sites. Premier Danielle Smith said Wednesday the goal is to keep federal staffers away from any place where oil and gas production and emissions data might be located. The reason is, Smith doesn't trust how the federal government will calculate greenhouse gas emissions as it continues to craft its proposed emissions cap. The premier said emissions data is the property of the Alberta government, and if a private company doesn't comply with the new rules, the province could make it a condition of its license. Supporters claim it protects provincial jurisdiction over resource data. Critics raise alarms about stifling oversight and environmental transparency. Shifting to other federal news, from Carl Meyer and Matt Simmons, LGI reporters at the Narwhal. An internal Canadian government briefing note released to the Narwhal under Access to Information Law shows a scientist's research was largely discounted despite accuracy by the Federal Energy Department, given it questions industry narratives around carbon emissions. Cornell University biogeochemist and ecosystem scientist Robert Howarth has conducted research that demonstrates how the total greenhouse gas emissions from exported U.S. liquefied natural gas is higher than U.S.-produced coal used in power plants. Howarth's research casts doubt on the industry's common talking point that using natural gas can help address climate change. His work shows how methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, leaks into the atmosphere during LNG processing, transport, and storage, as well as from oil and gas fracking operations. The released briefing notes show federal government has been reluctant to accept Howarth's findings, and that's leading Howarth to conclude the government of Canada is adopting industry talking points. Shifting from Canada to the United States, we turn to a series of controversies involving the Department of Government Efficiency, colloquially known as DOGE. There are again multiple stories about how this new initiate is acting and impacting the personal information the government holds. To start, Doge has continued to grab headlines with the confirmation hearing of Frank Bisignano, who openly embraces a self-proclaimed Doge persona to head the Social Security Administration. On top of that, a judge has attempted to block Doge from accessing sensitive information at the Education Department, the Treasury Department, and the Office of Personnel Management, citing national security concerns. The judge found the Trump administration likely violated the law, saying the government failed to adequately explain why Doge needed access to millions of records to perform its job duties. The ruling, which could be challenged on appeal, comes in a lawsuit filed by labor unions, retirees, and the advocacy group Democracy Forward. In a separate case last week, a judge temporarily blocked Doge from accessing Social Security databases that similarly contain vast amounts of personal information. The ongoing dispute reflects a deeper worry that Doge's proposed role might allow it to manage massive amounts of personal and financial data from federal databases. Meanwhile, mass layoffs under President Trump and tech magnate Elon Musk have left certain agencies understaffed and, some argue, more vulnerable to outside influence. Critics fear potential espionage or data manipulation in these chaotic transitions. For Russia, China, and other adversaries, the layoffs gut government agencies and present an unprecedented opportunity to recruit informants, national security, and intelligence, experts say. While Doge battles over data access, other U.S. stories highlight significant privacy and access issues, from the newest JFK document dump to developments around 23andMe and alleged cybercrimes in professional sports. Highlighting two recent articles following the release of JFK assassination-related records. On one hand, past CIA activities come to light. On the other, individuals named in the documents express dismay over their personal information being aired publicly. The release disregarded appropriate application of relevant redactions to protect personal information. That means among the documents, some Social Security numbers of government employees were not redacted. Officials at the White House said Thursday that a plan was in place to help those whose personal information was disclosed, including credit monitoring offered by the National Archives until new Social Security numbers are issued. This tension illustrates how transparency at all costs puts people at risk when their personal information is released and privacy rights are not considered. In other news, genetic testing company 23andMe announced its Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing amid a leadership upheaval. The co-founder and CEO has resigned as the struggling genetic testing company continues its push to cut costs. The company said it will look to sell substantially all of its assets through a court-approved reorganization plan. Last year, 23andMe agreed to pay $30 million in cash to settle a class action lawsuit, accusing the company of failing to protect customers whose personal information was leaked. Even as the company pledges to protect user genetic profiles, the financial distress raises questions about continuity and trust. Observers worry about the security and fate of customer DNA data. The bankruptcy and sale highlights that in the corporate world, your personal information is an asset that is bought and sold like any other. A former NFL and college assistant coach, Matt Weiss, now faces accusations of hacking athletes' private photos. Weiss, who worked for the Baltimore Ravens before joining the University of Michigan staff in 2021, was charged with 14 counts of unauthorized computer access and 10 counts of identity theft. According to an indictment, Weiss hacked into the computer accounts of thousands of college athletes, seeking intimate photos and videos. He has pleaded not guilty, spotlighting how technology misuse can intersect with sports at the highest level. The incident underscores a growing pattern of personal data breaches outside traditional corporate environments. In other U.S. news, an FBI agent who publicly accused the agency of a pro-Trump bias has been arrested and charged with disclosing confidential records after authorities say he included sensitive material about investigations and informants into a draft of his memoir. According to the agent, the FBI went after President Joe Biden's son, Hunter, while stifling his own investigation of President Donald Trump's ally, Rudy Giuliani. After filing a whistleblower complaint and testifying before Congress, the court affidavit said he went to his FBI office in October 2023 and printed copies of about 130 confidential files. The charges reflect a growing tension between whistleblowing, personal privacy, and national security protections. Shifting our focus overseas, we delve into demonstrations in Hungary and intensifying political crackdowns in Turkey, both highlighting the friction between governance, privacy, and public expression. Protesters in Hungary recently blocked traffic to oppose a new law banning LGBTQ+ pride events. The demonstration was the second within a week since Hungary used its two-thirds parliamentary majority to fast-track the law, seen by critics as the government's latest crackdown on the rights of the country's LGBTQ+ community. Authorities may now use facial recognition tools to identify individuals who attend prohibited events, such as the popular Budapest Pride, which draws tens of thousands each year, and can issue fines for violators of up to 200,000 Hungarian forints, which is about $546. Civil rights groups argue the legislation violates basic freedoms and fosters a culture of secrecy and fear around personal identities. The demonstration underscores the role of public assembly in challenging legal restrictions on expression. In Turkey, the spotlight is on the jailing of a prominent Erdogan rival and the subsequent detention of journalists covering the protests. Earlier, a court formally arrested the mayor and ordered him jailed, pending the outcome of a trial on corruption charges. His detention sparked the largest wave of street demonstrations in Turkey in more than a decade, with large crowds gathering outside City Hall for a fifth night in a row. The government's move drew international criticism, with many claiming this is part of a broader clampdown on political opponents. Despite pushback, the Turkish opposition leader visited the jailed rival to underscore solidarity. Meanwhile, heightened censorship and threats against press freedom raise alarms about the broader erosion of transparency and democratic accountability in the country. A union said at least 8 reporters and photojournalists were detained in what it called an attack on press freedoms and the people's right to learn the truth, calling for their immediate release. From global crackdowns to everyday fraud risk, our final segment takes us back to North America, where the month of March is Fraud Prevention Month, offering reminders of the cyber threats we face daily. As the month winds down, consumer advocacy groups emphasize vigilance against scams. The big concern being raised is artificial intelligence, as AI can be used to quickly produce texts, emails, and messages in the style and language of a specific person. It can also be used to clone anyone's voice, and in just minutes it can be used to make fake images, audio, or videos of real people. Experts stress monitoring financial statements and being mindful of personal data shared online. At the same time, a growing debate questions whether advanced encryption for personal devices is eroding official accountability. Signal is one of the many end-to-end encrypted messaging apps that include message auto-delete functions. While such apps promise increased security and privacy, when used by public officials, they often skirt open records laws meant to increase transparency around and public awareness of government decision-making. Some officials have used secure messaging to sidestep public record keeping, potentially bypassing FOI laws. Public officials and private citizens are consistently warned about hacking and data leaks, but those same technologies designed to increase privacy and security when used inappropriately decrease government transparency. A solid example comes in the revelations that a journalist was privy to sensitive discussions in a secure group chat. It raises broader concerns about how easily confidential and potentially dangerous communications can be shielded from legal scrutiny. Jeffrey Goldberg reported that he received a Signal invitation from Mike Waltz, Trump's national security advisor, to a Signal group chat that then included discussion of a pending attack on Yemen. While government officials have used Signal for organizational correspondence, it is not classified and can be hacked. Privacy and tech experts say the popular end-to-end encrypted messaging and voice call app is more secure than conventional texting and great for consumers. That said, it fails to meet the standards that are designed to protect national security at the highest level. And given the time of year, officials warn that identity thieves often exploit tax season. Unclear guidance or confusion around filing deadlines can open the door for phishing attempts and fraudulent tax filings. Cybersecurity experts stress that scammers prey on emotion and will often try to evoke fear or uncertainty. Many tax scams will ask you to act fast or click on a malicious link right away. Many tax scams also advertise big payouts, but at a price. It is important to remember federal tax agencies like the IRS will never initiate contact via email, text, or social media with requests for your personal information. They urge consumers to only use trusted, accredited tax professionals if you need help preparing your return. Finally, the surge in health-related posts online creates a minefield of misinformation. With personal data potentially at stake, experts remind the public to verify sources before acting on medical advice or clicking suspicious links. Despite alternative health practices and cures that lack the medical establishment's backing being a part of popular culture long before the internet, the plethora of health advice shared online has both prompted calls for safeguards and found a measure of mainstream acceptance. For example, the U.S. Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., had his Instagram account suspended in 2021 for posting misinformation about vaccine safety and COVID-19. Experts implore people to make sure those who are giving health advice have expertise in the field they're talking about. Before we go, we want to highlight in the week ahead, we'll have our federal election questions and survey online, and an upcoming commentary featuring a sit-down interview with BC Information and Privacy Commissioner Michael Harvey, following his keynote at the VIPS conference. As always, we hope today's stories help you stay informed about the latest issues surrounding privacy, information management, and public transparency. To help us keep the mics on, be sure to subscribe through FIBA News Monitoring or consider a donation. Our writer is Sean Fisk. Original music in today's show was composed by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, your host and producer. Thank you for joining. A big FIBA thank you to all the contributors, reporters, and outlets that make this podcast possible, and to you, our listeners, who help us thrive. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time on Access and Privacy Online.